listen to music just as much as I do. It's so lovely to hear the beat of the drum and the lyrics of somebody's good voice. It makes you want to dance sometimes and just get all excited. It puts you in a mood, it uplifts your mood. But how does your body know to respond to that music? How does your brain interpret that music? That stimulus is coming in from outside, but it has to go through several processes to get to your brain. And that's what I'm going to explain to you now. The anatomy of the ear and how the process of hearing actually works. Okay, so this stimulus that's coming in from outside, the sound waves, they come from a source. So it could be someone singing, it could be drumming, it could be me just speaking to you. That is the stimulus. But it has to go to a sense organ. And that sense organ in the case of sound is the ear. That sense organ has to have receptors. So somehow it has to receive the stimulus coming in, those sound waves coming in, and the ear has hair cells in the cochlea. Those are the receptors on the organ of Corti that receive the stimulus. The receptors then, and this is quite important, the receptors take that stimulus and they convert it into nerve impulses. You need nerve impulses because it has to travel via a nerve to the brain. And in the case of hearing, it has to go via the auditory nerve to the brain. If we look here now, this is a very important thing to know about a sense organ. It has receptors, and the job of that the receptors are to convert the stimulus, whether it's light coming into the eye or whether it's sound waves coming into the ear, or somebody touching you on your skin. It has to take that stimulus and convert it into nerve impulses so that it can be transmitted via nerves to the brain. Now, this video is about the ear and hearing. So before we can understand the process of hearing, how we actually get that stimulus all the way to the brain, we have to know the anatomy of the ear, all the parts of the ear. What are their names and where are they positioned in the ear? So the ear has got three parts: an outer ear, a middle ear, and the inner ear. The outer ear is the part that you can see, basically, and it starts with the pinna, which is the part that can pick up the sound waves. It's made of cartilage. Then we have the auditory canal. That's the little tube or space going from outside deeper into your ear, into your ear and your head. And then you have the tympanic membrane. Now that tympanic membrane is also known as the tympanum. So you might see that in a question, or you might see tympanic membrane, but don't say eardrum. You must use something a little bit better than that. Okay, so tympanic membrane or tympanum is the boundary between the outer ear and the middle ear. And the sound waves come in the pinna and travel all along the auditory canal all the way to the tympanic membrane, and the tympanic membrane starts vibrating. And then we move to the middle ear. So the middle ear, if we look here, consists of a hammer, an anvil, and a stirrup. Now the hammer, anvil, and stirrup are also known as ossicles. There are three ossicles, and these are the tiniest bones in your body. They are about as big as your pinky nail. They're really, really tiny. And they have, as the tympanic membrane vibrates, it causes the hammer to vibrate. It has a knock-on effect to the anvil, and then the anvil vibrates, and then the stirrup picks up the vibrations and passes it on to the inner ear. But if you look here, at the bottom of the middle ear, you have a tube leading off, and that's the Eustachian tube, and you write it with a capital letter. The Eustachian tube is a tube that connects your middle ear with your throat, pharynx area. And if you ever have an infection in your throat, sometimes the germs will travel up into the middle ear and cause middle ear infection. Another thing about the Eustachian tube that you should know is, I don't know if you had the altitude that you're at changing suddenly. Let's say if you've had the privilege of flying in an aeroplane and then landing, sometimes your ears will get blocked, Or maybe if you're traveling in a car and you go up a mountain to a very high altitude, then you can feel pressures changing in your ear. But let's say if your ears get blocked, you sometimes pinch your nose and then you can like pop your ears in a way. And what you're actually doing when you say pop your ears is that tympanic membrane is a little bit curved out of position, and then the pressure comes up the Eustachian tube, and from the inside it pushes the tympanic membrane a little bit out, and then it normalizes the pressure in your ear. So that's just something to keep in mind about the Eustachian tube. If we look at the ossicles a little bit closer, you get the hammer is the first one that's near the tympanic membrane. Then you know what a hammer looks like. An anvil, cobblers use it. They put their shoes on it, and then they upside down, and then they can work on the sole of the shoe by gluing it or tapping it with a hammer to knock things into the bottom of the shoe to keep it in place. And then stirrup gets its name from, if you on a saddle, when you're riding a horse, part of your gear where you put your feet into, it's a stirrup. And you can see there that person's foot is in the stirrup. It looks a lot like the actual little ossicle, which is called a stirrup. And I've highlighted the first letter of each one. It spells the word has, H-A-S, hammer, anvil, stirrup. So if you have to speak about the ossicles, you can name them in order. They do have other names as well. You may have been taught other names for them, but I'm just going to stick to these because they're the easiest to remember. Now, if we look at the inner ear, now we're going from the stirrup and we're going to go deeper into the ear, and this is now where the impulse, the stimulus is going to be converted into a nerve impulse. But first of all, the stimulus, the vibrations, come from the stirrup, and they're going to go to the oval window. Now, at the oval window, that starts vibrating, and then it goes to the cochlea. Now, the cochlea is that snail shape, like looking. It looks like a snail shell in a way. It's got a lot of fluid in it, perilymph, endolymph, all that fluid, and it's got the organ of Corti in there. And the organ of Corti has got receptors, like I said earlier, with little hair cells, and it picks up these vibrations and converts them into a nerve impulse. But any extra pressure that is built up in the cochlea gets passed on through the round window and back into the middle ear to release any pressure. So if you look there, you've got the tympanic membrane that's at the border between the outer ear and the middle ear. You've got the oval window, and then you've got the round window. Those are the three membranes in the ear that you must remember. Now, how do you remember whether it's oval window or round window? Because those two labels are often switched around by learners, and they can't remember which one is which. And I've got it's a silly little way, but a way to remember it. If you think the sound is coming in from the outer ear along the auditory canal to the tympanic membrane, and the first membrane after the tympanic membrane that it hits is the oval window. So you can think, oh, there comes the sound. So the O of oval, it will help you remember that that's the first one that it hits after the tympanic membrane, and then it goes to the round window. Something else I want to tell you about the oval window is the oval window is smaller than the tympanic membrane. So the tympanic membrane, the sound comes in, and then it kind of, as it goes through the ossicles, it funnels onto a smaller surface area. The oval window is smaller than the tympanic membrane. So the sound is amplified on the oval window. Just something to remember. Once the cochlea has converted the stimulus into a nerve impulse, it then goes to the auditory nerve, and that takes the nerve impulse to the brain, which tells you what kind of sound is coming in, whether it's the music that you're listening to, or whether it's somebody knocking on the door or calling out your name, or even me speaking to you now. Your brain can interpret that. The ear has another function, and that is your balance and position in space. And the parts of the ear that are involved with that are the semicircular canals. you have 3 semicircular canals, and they're sort of at right angles to each other. So you know when you're spinning around, or whether you're doing a cartwheel or a handstand, or if you lose your balance, how to correct yourself to get upright again, or maybe you're just walking forward or running, this part of the ear picks it up. And you've also got ampulla at the base of the semicircular canal. There's several of them, and inside they have little receptors called cristae. And those cristae, as the fluid in the semicircular canals moves over the cristae, those are the receptors there that help you know what position you're in and whether you need to upright yourself or not. But this video is actually more about the hearing. So let's go and look now at the process of hearing. If you're unsure about the anatomy, I suggest you go back to the beginning and watch that part again, and then carry on with this part of the video. Right, the first thing is, if you'll see there that I've got in green, I've put all the parts of the ear. So every part that I've mentioned earlier, I've put in green, just to remind you, and then the rest is what actually happens there. So the pinna, which is the outer ear, the part that you can see on somebody, that directs the sound waves into the auditory canal. Some animals can even turn their pinna around to pick up the sound waves. Then the sound waves go and they hit the tympanic membrane and cause it to vibrate. And those are the 2 things that happen in the outer ear. Now we're going to look at what happens in the middle ear as it goes from the tympanic membrane. That causes the 3 ossicles to vibrate, the hammer, anvil, and stirrup. And when it gets to the stirrup, the last ossicle, it causes the oval window, remember, O, to vibrate, the oval window, and the sound is amplified there. And because the tympanic membrane is bigger than the oval window. Then, what happens now is that the oval window causes, because of its vibrations, it sets up waves in the fluid in the cochlea. Now, in the cochlea, that snail-like shaped structure, the receptors of the organ of Corti are there, and they are stimulated. And what they do, remember, receptors change a stimulus into a nerve impulse. So now it's in the form of a nerve impulse, and then it has to go to the brain. So it goes via the auditory nerve to the brain. And then, don't forget the very last thing that we haven't mentioned yet. Any excess pressure in the cochlea is released via the round window back into the middle ear or the Eustachian tube. So don't forget that last sentence right at the end. Now finally, I've got just this a little example of an exam question. With the eye and the ear, you often get given a diagram with letters, and then you get answered questions about it. You don't get asked to draw it, you get given the diagram. So learn your diagram and know all the parts of the ear very well. You can even take this diagram on the screen now and see if you could name all the parts, even though it's not part of my discussion with you now. Let's look at the questions there. It says, give the letter and name of the part that, first of all, absorbs pressure set up in the ear, in the inner ear. So which one will absorb the pressure that's in the inner ear? So that's G, round window. Did you also get that? See if you can get the next one. It maintains equal pressure on either side of the tympanum. So I told you about that earlier. Which one is that? Yes, some of you got it right. F, the Eustachian tube, right. And then the last one is E, the auditory nerve arises from the cochlea and transmits sound impulses to the brain. The auditory nerve is involved with the ear, the optic nerve is with the eye. So just make sure you know the difference there. But audio, auditory, you should be able to remember that. So I hope this has been helpful and that you're going to really ace hearing in the exams and the upcoming assessments that you have. And I really want, give me your feedback on how you found this video.